What's the good word, y'all? DKB here. So let's talk about free safety Tony Adams. I think this is weird. You could label him as a dark horse candidate again in 2023 because that's essentially the same title that he had this season when we were thinking about who's going to lead the way at free safety for us. So let's kind of dive back into some of his history, talk about recent events, on why he could potentially be a huge player for us in 2023. So remember that he is a player that's coming out of the draft where COVID happened. We were doing Zoom meetings and everything. And so there wasn't a whole lot that was known about him, obviously an undrafted free agent, but the only other player that was undrafted for the New York Jets other than Zonovan Bam Knight to make the roster, and it was a huge surprise at the time because we ended up letting Jason Pinnock go, thinking he would make the practice squad, and keeping Tony Adams, which in and of itself was a very underrated move, or maybe overrated depending on what your thoughts were, but it spoke volumes to what the coaching staff thought about Tony Adams, and that he made much more of an impression right away out of the gate than Jason Pinnock, who was already somewhat established on the team after getting some playing time in his rookie year. So when we think back on some of the comments that Robert Saleh had at that time to explain his decision, he said he's communicating at a high level, he's acing his assignments, he's doing great in man coverage, he's dominating special teams. So just his overall body work from OTAs all the way down to cut day, he attacked the heck out of it, and they were really excited to see what he was able to accomplish. So that spoke volumes to me, but they also, Robert Saleh took the time to highlight that during these Zoom interviews, the thing that stuck out was Tony Adams was adamant that he wants to take someone's job. The man wants to play. They felt the passion. They seen it on the game film. They went ahead and stuck with him. So when we take a look at what might have intrigued them, if you want to consider him somewhat of like a priority agent after the draft, he was a couple of accolades, right? So he was the first cornerback to start at Illinois since Vontae Davis. He was able to get 5 years of game tape due to the COVID rules. He got that additional year of eligibility. And then his relative athletic score, or his RAS score, he got a 9.76. That definitely puts him in, the upper tier of athletes at his position. And we're talking about a man that's about 5'11", 6 foot, playing somewhere between 200, 205 pounds, which offers up a world of versatility for him, and this is one of the things that stuck out. So during his time in Illinois, he spent time playing corner, which was his natural position, and then due to injuries, he was able to go over to safety, and then they were also able to utilize him essentially as a big nickel, slot guy for themselves. So lots of opportunity there for him to get his hands in, get his hands dirty. Some of the things from an athletic standpoint, as you can tell from his RAS score, he has very good speed, probably better acceleration necessarily than top end speed, but he has enough to be able to recover from getting beat. He's also a strong run defender, and I would probably give the edge to his run defense ability in terms of not only his willingness, but also statistically. You see it on film. He's able to come down there and kind of rock some people, solid form, but he really gets in on the action. And then when we're talking about his pro day numbers and stuff from where they gathered the RAS, he essentially would have been top 3 when you look at the combine in terms of short shuttle and vertical jump, and he would have been 4th among all defensive backs in the broad jump. So plenty of explosion, plenty of ability to go out there and put that on display, especially at the free safety position where you have a little bit more free reign as that last line of defense to go out there, especially when you're coming downhill and make some things happen. Now, some of the, opportunities on his game film during his career, he did miss 10 games. I'm sure it might be slightly higher than that, but definitely 10 games within the first couple years of his tenure at Illinois to injury. That impacted him quite a bit, which is why he ended up spending that extra time there. And then we are talking about him not being the best in terms of route recognition. That definitely is going to need more polish in his game. His coverage ability is strong. He was able to go out there and grab himself 6 and interceptions. He made it tough for a lot of people. There's a reason why it's a big deal that he was the first cornerback to start since Vontae Davis. But he needs to work on his hand usage when he's attacking at the point of the ball. Sometimes he's just left out there kind of wailing and flailing and kind of hoping that he just happens to be in the way. So somewhat of a discipline issue, somewhat of just kind of reworking a bit of behavior there. And ultimately, I feel like there was more pros than cons to his game, but definitely not in the same tier as guys like a Lewis Seen, a Kirby Joseph, that were coming out, just happened to be at Illinois and all of the things that he was going through. But there is a lot to love about his game, between the versatility, the strong athletic profile, and then just knowing that he's a strong run defender, which is a huge opportunity for us as a defense. We've seen this much when Quinnen Williams went down. Is always going to be something that stands out to a New York Jets defense. Now, ultimately, all of that ended up putting him in a category where you would say he was recommended to be a practice squad player coming out of college. But this isn't one of those just a camp body guys. This was definitely someone where you looked at him and you said he has the opportunity for more if he can continue that progression. And it's a little bit of a soft scout, I guess. And what I mean by that is you can put that label on a lot of guys if they do these things and they'll pan out great. But from what you've seen in terms of the improvement from year after year, it definitely seemed like a guy that was more than willing. And guys like that just don't go out and say they want to take someone's job. And he was able to go out there and back it up and check that box off right away. So kudos to him. Now, when we take a look at some of the recent history with him, he's done, fairly well for himself, right? LaMarcus Joyner and Tony Adams, you can argue that there would have been an upgrade if we would have gave Tony Adams more time over the course of the season. And what I mean by that is prior to recent events, he really only had 14 snaps on the season in terms of the defense. He was playing mostly special teams. That switched against the Seahawks. We've seen him play 60 snaps. He was able to rack up 7 tackles, 4 of those being solo. But he definitely has the opportunity to be a potential starter at the free safety spot for us. We're talking about an offseason of development. He knows what things he wants to fine-tune and work on. He'll have another NFL offseason of prepping and strength conditioning and all of these things. A second year in the same defense. Ideally, you'd have to imagine there's going to be more talent around him as well in terms of the linebacker core. Maybe another piece for him to compete with in the safety unit, aside from Jordan Whitehead, maybe an upgrade from an Ashton Davis or something like that. But irregardless, I think the guy has the chops to get it done if he can get more playing time. And it's interesting. I kind of see some parallels between him and Jermaine Johnson. Obviously, vastly different in that Jermaine Johnson was a critical part of our defensive line rotation right away. Tony Adams kind of had the luxury, though, of being able to hone his craft while still being involved with the team. As we mentioned, core special teamer kind of person at the moment, and then things flipped with the LaMarcus Joyner injury. I do think LaMarcus Joyner can ultimately end up retiring this season. He's dealing with the hip issue. He already had thoughts about it last year, and then his passion for wanting to play with Robert Saleh won over. I can't see the coaching staff willing to take a chance on an aging veteran like him again, considering he hasn't necessarily broken the mold or given above average gameplay for the majority of the season, even though he was able to go out there and get some picks and stuff. And for whatever it's worth, for those that like PFF, Tony Adams was able to grade out so far on the season with something like a 64.7, and I think LaMarcus Joyner has like a 50.4 PFF grade, something to that effect. But irregardless, it's definitely a great starting point for Tony Adams and where he's at in his career. And regardless of what we add, unless it's a significant veteran or we do go out there and pick like somebody in the first 3 rounds at the safety unit, I would argue that Tony Adams probably has first dibs on that starting spot. He's only really looking at LaMarcus Joyner if he returns, which would also require us to have to sign him again. Ashton Davis, and then there's going to be question marks after that, and Ashton Davis isn't even a guarantee to stay next year. So I don't know. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are. How comfortable would you be with him becoming your starter at free safety, given the limited sample size that we've seen? And what would you be willing to invest if you do believe in Tony Adams in terms of bringing in competition? Is it still a high value draft pick? Is it just somebody that you think would offer decent competition in terms of a veteran that's not going to break the books? Let me know what your guys' thoughts are, and I'll catch you again. Peace.